Welcome back to another episode of the Cody Tucker Show. As always, I'm your host, Cody Tucker. Well, it's been a pretty good week. The rat problem has slowly but surely gone away. If anyone was staying updated from the last episode, I had a bit of a problem with rats in the old yard, and definitely popped one right in the fucking head, and since then, they seem to have learned their lesson. So, I guess guns do have their purpose. Yeah, so someone told me, whenever I was talking about that, about, these rats that are just like fucking stampeding through the yard. They're like, oh, why don't you just go to like an animal shelter and get a cat? And I don't think they understood the size of the rats that I was talking about that are running through this fucking yard. I mean, I would need a goddamn Bengal tiger to take care of these rats. Like if I got a cat and just let it out in the yard to take care of these rats, I would come back outside and that cat would be probably nailed to a cross and being burned alive. Like, these rats are not, I mean, this isn't like fucking Stuart Little running through my yard. I mean, these sons of bitches look like Wolverines. So, yeah. Cat, not gonna work. But I appreciate the recommendations. I did have a little phase which it kind of brought me back to this. I had a phase in school where I got like really into falconry. Which, if you don't know what that is, it is the breeding and training of falcons. And like what you would do is have like a little hatchery set up, breed and nurture these little baby falcons. And they would eventually grow into adult falcons, and you would be able to put on like a little glove, go outside, they would have this little like executioner's mask on, undo it, and they would take off and eventually just come right back and land on your arm. And I always thought that would be the coolest goddamn thing in the world if I could ever figure out how to do that. The main reason that I wanted to do it is because when I was in high school, we had a neighbor who had these little chihuahuas who, for some reason, did not like taking shits in their own yard. And our yard was, I guess, like the prime dump zone. And so every day, like, I would just see these turds in the yard that, like, I mean, how in the fuck does a turd this big come out of a dog that big? I mean, it is insane how, like, I mean, it defies all logic how giant the turds from these little chihuahuas were. But I always thought, like, it would just be a fantasy of mine that the neighbors would be outside playing with these little dogs, and I would go outside on my porch, falcon in arm, undo the little mask, say, unleash hell, and this falcon would fly way up into the air and just come down and just fucking snatch one of these chihuahuas while these kids are playing with it. It'd be like, don't ever let these dogs shit in my yard again. This is what you get, bitch. I mean, it was like a, real fucking fantasy that I had. So yeah. Needless to say, I was a very fucking strange teenager and kid. But, I guess it's worked out for me in the long run. Yeah, here I am fucking pissing into the wind for 20 people. But it is what it is. What's been going on in the world? So, goddamn, this is so fucking stupid. I mean, I'm sure everybody has seen this by now. But a teacher here in the old home state of Texas just got into some deep shit for having a discussion with his, like, what looked like middle school kids, where he decides to have this conversation about race with these kids, who most of which are black or Hispanic. I mean, there's not a lot of white kids in here that would have his back. But in this discussion, he tells the kids that he is racist, which that's the first thing he says. Not a great way to start off this conversation. But he starts by saying, "Oh, I am a racist," and then proceeds to go into this discussion about how he is, like anyone, ethnocentric. So he puts his ethnicity above everyone else. And he doesn't seem to think there's anything wrong with this. And he is getting just fucking drugged by these kids who are like, "Hey, you fucking asshole. Like, hey, yo, teach." Like, I mean, it is mind-boggling. Like, look. So, yeah, and the teachers put on, like, administrative leave, blah, 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 which, whatever that means. But, look, I mean, I guess maybe just things are different now. But I grew up in a school that was, not exaggerating, 93% white. So, basically like a Kanye West concert. And I never, ever heard a teacher say something racist. Now, I'm not saying there weren't teachers who did. I never heard it. I never once heard a teacher say something racist. I never remember having a discussion about race in class. And I'm talking about middle school, junior high, or even high school. Never got brought up. If it got brought up, it was like in context with something like, the closest I can think of is when we were reading like Huckleberry Finn. And if you haven't read Huckleberry Finn, there's a character with a name who, probably wouldn't be in the book if it was written in 2022. And we had to read the book out loud, like take turns reading, popcorn reading, as it was called. And the teacher clearly expressed, when we get to this motherfucker's name, pause for a second and don't goddamn say his first name. Just say his last name, Jim. And sure enough, some of the students kind of getting on a roll with the reading, and then there it goes. And stop. What the fuck did I tell you? Don't say his first name. And then that, I remember at one point led into sort of a discussion about race, which in that context, probably a good time to talk about it, because we are reading a book where the N-word is in the book a lot. It's a fucking person's name. And, so I do remember having like sort of a discussion about that, about like, well, why are we reading this book? Can't they just redo the book and take that out? Which I think they have done that since then. But, and like it was Mark Twain a racist by having this character called that? And like, what was the historical? We had like a bit of a discussion. At no point did my teacher say, well, I'm a racist. So this is what fuck no. If my teachers were racist, they hit it really fucking well. Which is a good rule of thumb for all races. Like, fucking lock that shit deep down inside. I mean, it's like if you're into like shit porn. Like, okay, you are, but don't let anyone know. Just, that's between you and your web browser. I mean, now, we definitely had racist students. Like that, 100% had super, because they had racist parents who grew up in that same city and it was even more percent white when they were in school. Now they're raising kids who are also going to be racist, and most of them, I'm sure, probably still are. So yeah, I'm not saying there wasn't a fuck ton of racism in my school growing up, because it was. But it was coming from the other kids. It was never coming from adults. Not, again, that I saw. I'm not saying that there aren't a few, alumni of color who are like, hey, motherfucker, let me tell you what happened during PE one time. Like, not saying that. I'm just saying it was never a thing of like, we're just going to openly discuss this shit. And I mean, it's just fucking nuts. Like, I guess now, because people just want people to have discussions about race, which I'm not saying they shouldn't, but the people who are leading the discussions should not start off their sentence by saying, well, I'm a racist. I mean, and what's crazy is, like, in the video, the teacher is, like, getting kind of, one, he's talking to these kids like they're adults. Never a good idea. Even at, like, a high school level, well, maybe. I mean, but for the most part, like, he's sitting there with them, like, legs crossed, like, having this, like, discussion, like he's fucking, Edward James Olmos and Stand and Deliver. Like, I'm going to level with you kids. And the way he's going to level with these, students of color is by saying, I'm a racist, and I think my ethnicity is better than your ethnicity. Which, probably just not a great thing to do. I mean, just teach these motherfuckers how to, like, do, long division. Like, leave the fucking philosophical debates for, college. I mean, my God, like, what did he think he was going to get out of that conversation? That he would, like, teach these kids that being racist is fine? Because, and what's great, but yeah, he's getting mad at these kids in the video because they're not letting him finish his train of thought, which his train of thought is, like, he's getting mad because they're saying, like, whoa, you just said you're a racist, blah, blah, blah. Like, and rightfully so, they're like, hey, we weren't expecting this to get brought up today. We thought we were going to be reading fucking, some fucking book, and this fucking teach is bringing up, is bringing up the 15th Amendment. And he's like, no, you're not letting me finish my train of thought. You know what? When you start a sentence off by saying, I'm a racist, if you start a sentence off that way, you don't really need to finish. You don't really need to finish your train of thought. That kind of starts it and stops it at the exact same time. I mean, what were you gonna say after that was gonna make the first part understandable and alright? I mean, god damn, like, I mean, it's just crazy. Like, I mean, there's a lot of examples of this too, of, like, teachers getting into deep shit now because they're saying, like, they're having these discussions that they shouldn't be having with students about race and stuff like that. And it's different if you're having, like, I mean, there's a time for it. I'm not saying, like, I'm just saying middle school, which it looks like these kids are middle school, probably not the right time. Probably a little young. And god damn, don't start off by saying I'm a racist. A good rule of thumb for any time, any moment in life. A job interview, probably not good to say, hi, I'm so-and-so, I'm a racist, but, would love, I could definitely see myself working at, Foot Locker. Going to the doctor, probably not a good time to tell him that you're a racist. Just all around, not the best way of going about things. But yeah, like, I remember, I mean, racism was for sure a thing. I am, again, not trying to, wash it all out that there was nothing racist. Because there was. I mean, I heard goddamn, I heard the N word in school so much. Like, you would think that I went to school in, like, 1950s Birmingham, Alabama. Like, with the shit that students would say, like, my other, like, classmates say, like, oh my God, like, where the fuck are you saying this to me? And because, like, they all always kind of thought that, like, I was on their side. So I'm like, bitch, I'm not on your side. Like, I'm not. What in the fuck made you think that you were going to say the N word to me and I was going to go, like, oh, yeah, yeah. Like, oh, shit. Like, I remember, like, this will tell you how, like, racist, like, where I grew up was. When I was in 8th grade, there was a kid who used to just go around at lunch and hand out business cards from his dad and his uncle. It was like dad and his uncle gave him these little business cards, and he would hand them out. And he handed me one of them because I was like, what the fuck is this? And I didn't want to be left out. So I was like, hey, I'll take one. And then I look at it, and it is a business card for the local chapter of the Ku Klux Klan. I was like, holy fuck, they have business cards. I was like, God damn, dude, like, you're just handing these out to people? He's like, yeah. Like he looked at me like I was a dumbass for being, like, slightly confused by what was going on. And I was like, dude, I don't want this shit. And he was like, why? I'm like, what the fuck? What? Why would you think I would want this? So I handed it back to him, and I was just like, you go about your business. And then 3 years later, he was driving home from school, like when we were in high school, went off the road, hit a ditch, got shot out his front windshield, and died. So, maybe there is a God. I mean, god damn, dude. Like, I still remember seeing that and being like, holy shit, this is from the goddamn KKK. And it was like a real business card, like laminated, had like their logo, that little white cross thing, like had pictures of KKK shit and like phone numbers. It was like, god damn, like he's a mechanic or something. Like, yeah, it was just nuts. I remember, I mean, this is not school related, but like whenever I was a kid, like my granddad was a lawyer, and like during summers, like if my parents were working, we sometimes would just go to like work with my granddad, like go to his law firm, stay in his office, and just hang out there. Basically, like while he babysat us, and I mean, he basically just like made me read like law books so that I wouldn't like bother him. But I remember one time seeing, like, because it was right by this like the city courthouse, and looking out the window and seeing people in Klan robes going into that courthouse and being real fucking confused by that. And yeah, and it just turned out like the KKK did meetings, like had like meetings there, which I don't think they did very much after that. I think that kind of went away. But yeah, I remember him saying, like, he was like, yeah, the KKK has meetings at the courthouse. I was like, what the fuck? And meanwhile, this city is the city I'm talking about, not the city I went to school in, but the city that I'm talking about is opposite. So predominantly African American. Which, I mean, it takes some fucking brass ones on you to be to be dressed like that in that city. Holy shit. But I just remember thinking, like, this is fucking nuts. Like it felt like I had fallen asleep and woken up in the 50s. I guess, like, this is insane that, I mean, I guess it is legal. I mean, the right to, whatever, the right to freedom of assembly in the First Amendment. Was it speech, freedom of speech, press, assembly, petition, and religion, I think are the 5. So, I guess it does fit into there, but god damn, man. I don't know. I mean, call me woke, but I was never too interested in the KKK. I mean, no, that's very social justice warrior of me. But yeah, was not a thing that I was. I mean, it was just, and I mean, I remember this motherfucker handing out these business cards, and most of the kids taking them and being like, "Oh, thank you." Like, it wasn't like a "what the fuck is he doing?" Like, I remember just being kind of like on an island there. As being like about the only motherfucker who was like very confused by what was going on. So, I mean, that might tell you a little bit more about what our situation was like. But I can tell you this, for all that racism and shit all the shit that we had, if a teacher knew that he was handing those out, would not have been good for him. So I mean, it there were, you got to kind of take it all in together. Like, the adults in the situation were pretty fucking good people. It was just kids who grew up with fucking redneck shithead parents, and they raised redneck shithead kids. I mean, I'm lucky that I did not grow up with just outright racism. I definitely grew up with it, but not necessarily from my parents. My parents have actually always been pretty fucking middle of the road. I'm not saying they're like, they're not, going on like, they're not marching down Martin Luther King Boulevard every year. But they're not, I wouldn't say they're racist. Doesn't sound very convincing. But I'm just saying, like, it's kind of the standard you put it against. If you put it against like the very woke standard, then they are. If you put it against, if you compare it to like, I don't want to say like real racism, but kind of real racism, then they're not. They're all right. So yeah, this is not looking good for them. I realize as I'm saying this out loud, they're not. They're good. Uh, but like the other members of my family, not so much. That's where I grew up hearing wild shit. Was from like uncles and cousins. Like the cousins I had that were like way older than me, who were basically fucking uncles. That's where I heard some wild shit growing up as a kid. Like, I remember, I don't know if I told this story or not, but I remember, like, as a kid, I was super well, besides heavy metal and like rock, very into like rap as a little kid. Like, up until I was about 10. Like, so I'm talking about like really little kid. I was like heavily into like whatever rap was popular then. Outkast, Nelly, Trick Daddy, Ja Rule, Eminem for sure, of course. But so I like for a little bit dressed like a person who would be into rap. Kind of like very like Malibu's Most Wanted. That's kind of how I dressed. Like, I had a very big fascination with like Fred Durst. So I kind of dressed like that for a while. And I remember one of my uncles coming up to me. So I was like wearing this was like a fad at the time, was to like wear a hat and just slightly, not all the way to the side, but just slightly off kilter, And I was wearing this hat, and I remember him coming up to me. And at this time, I'm probably 9, 10 at the oldest. And him coming up to me, just pulling the hat down and yanking it forward and said, "Don't ever wear your hat like a, you fill in the blank." And I remember being like really fucking, like, didn't say anything. I just looked down and didn't look up. I just looked down, kind of closed my eyes, and was like, I've never heard somebody say something like that, like that intense. I'd heard them say shit like that, but never to me, and just that like angrily racist. And I just remember thinking, like, motherfucker, like, they really are racist. Like, if there was ever any doubt in my mind, which there wasn't much, that really nailed. I was like, God damn, that is a crazy thing to say to a fucking 9-year-old. let's say 10, like crazy thing to say to a 10-year-old who, I was just dressing like what I saw people on MTV dressing like. Uh, you know, and yeah, I remember doing that and just being like, holy fuck. And that kind of like pushed me way to the opposite, where I wasn't like, oh yeah, you're right, I am doing that. Let me, get my robe on. Like, instead, I was just like, you know what? Fuck all these people in this family. Fuck every one of them. Because y'all are all, I mean, he's the one who said it, but y'all all would say the same shit, or you damn sure wouldn't have stuck up for me if you were close enough to hear what happened. Y'all would have been taking his side, like, yeah, he's right, don't wear your hat like that. Like, so that kind of put me towards the path of like, fuck these people. And yeah, worked out pretty well, I guess. I mean, I like to think I'm pretty liberal to, whatever. So, I guess it worked out, but fuck, man. I just, like, that teacher, like, sitting there, it just, like, fucking brought back shit where I was like, God damn, like, we never would have had discussions like this. And, like, don't be so fucking stupid. That's really, like, a great rule of thumb for anyone. Is like, if you're racist, tuck that shit in deep. Don't let anyone know. And damn sure don't start off a single sentence ever by saying, well, I'm a racist. And then try to justify by saying, well, actually, I'm ethnocentric. Okay, he's getting, which is crazy, he's getting mad at these motherfuckers, these kids, who are at oldest 12 years old, because they're like kind of confused by the term ethnocentric. No shit. Like, I mean, if, I'm sure most 12 years, most adults probably aren't going to really understand what the fuck the word ethnocentric means. But he's like, no, y'all aren't understanding. I'm ethnocentric. Like, and they're like, hey, motherfucker, you're a racist. Yeah, they're actually right. Not the fucking teacher. The teacher, goddamn. Look, crazy. I mean, I believe in having, good discussions. Like, I think having discussions about race is not a bad thing. I'm not trying to say that by any means. But if you are, I think it's great to have those discussions, especially if you're, like, wanting to learn. Because, like, how I'm talking about, like, growing up in a city that was, in a school that was 93% white, did not learn a whole lot about what the, the average life experience was for someone who is not white. And I'm sure that I had, like, ignorant preconceptions that I didn't know were ignorant as a kid. And that I had to, like, learn out of that. But goddamn, I would not have been, like, I don't know. I mean, I do remember us having a lot of Holocaust conversations, and even in that sense, you got an idea of how, like, fucking racist some of these students were. Because, like, we would read Night by Elie Wiesel, or, watch a documentary, whatever, a Diary of Anne Frank, all kinds of shit about the Holocaust. And you would have just these kids go like, why the fuck do we have to keep hearing about the Holocaust? I would just be sitting there like, God damn, it's not, it's not like a 2-day protest or something. I mean, it's kind of a big deal. Like, yeah, them just being like, why do we have to keep hearing about the Holocaust? Like, well, historically speaking, it kind of never had fucking happened before and hasn't happened since. So, a wee bit of an anomaly. And usually when something is an anomaly in history, you talk about it. So, yeah. But I just remember thinking, like, being annoyed by hearing about the Holocaust maybe isn't just outright racist, but it kind of is. I mean, the fact that you don't even want to hear about what it was like. It's kind of like, it's a little Kanye-ish. I'll say that. But, well, I think I avoided any close calls here on this one, so better stop while I'm ahead. Goodbye.